Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker this afternoon, Mike Ishii.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you to the Day of Remembrance Committee and to the Bay Area community for the honor of this invitation. I'm just wondering, maybe together, can we take a collective breath? I think this moment requires a breath together, just to ground. Sudo for Solidarity started as a protest at the 2018 Tule Lake pilgrimage. We stood together in opposition to the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy that ripped immigrant children from the arms of their parents and put them in cages while their families were deported. In the 5.5 years since then, we have become a national Japanese-American organization that is rooted in the legacy of resistance from within our own community while inside U.S. concentration camps. It is a legacy that includes resistors who endured the brutality of the Tule Lake Stockade, the rioters of Manzanar, the draft resistors of Heart Mountain, those who went on strike against corruption and labor exploitation, and the Issei who erected a stone monument to James Wakasa, and so many countless others. We understand that we share an intersectional history of surveillance, forced removals, mass incarceration, separation of families, and deportation that has been weaponized against communities of color, indigenous communities, and immigrants in the U.S. So our annual DOR grounds us in the resistance and fortitude of the 125,000 people who experienced trauma and state violence. The DOR also marks us as keepers of the knowledge and legacy in order to act whenever threats to freedom must once again be opposed. To the survivors here today, on behalf of everyone here, I thank you for holding your story sacred. We exist because of you. Okagasameda. We exist because of your resilience. Your strength and your spirit have guided us to this moment. Let's all pause and feel the connection to our family members, to our community, to those who have passed, those who remain, and those who are yet to arrive. Honored ancestors, we need you. And we need each other as we step into solidarity with people who are now targeted by violence and attacks upon their civil liberties and their human rights. We here are informed by generational trauma, fracturing, and the loss of cultural legacy. But we have also learned through much effort how to begin to heal and repair, and how to begin to address very deep fractures. Tsudu just hosted Kintsugi, the first Japanese-American community conference on healing and repair of community trauma from World War II. We understand that our healing is also undeniably bound to solidarity and to standing with other communities targeted by state violence. Dr. Satsuki Ina, co-founder of Sudo for Solidarity, spoke to the nation as our camp survivors committed civil disobedience, blocking the gate to Fort Sill to stop the opening of a concentration camp for 1,600 children. And she said, "We must be the allies that our families needed when America turned its back on us as we were being disappeared from our homes, our schools, our farms, and our jobs. So in this moment, we are dazed by the cruelty and efficiency of an attempted overthrow of civil society, and there is despair. There is fear and discouragement. After all, they're bringing armed forces into the communities to round people up. But to succumb and remain complacent in this moment is a form of obedience and a surrender to fascism. It abandons our ancestors and our survivors present here today to the moral complacency of a nation that allowed for our people to be rounded up. So let's be sad for the losses. Let's acknowledge our fear. But we must not be defined by this. Find your anger. This is a moment for outrage and for action. The Trump administration is using the template of Japanese American forced removal and mass incarceration as their blueprint. They have cited the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, an archaic law that grants the executive branch of the government the right to declare an emergency during a time of war and to round up and imprison immigrants and suspend due process. This law was always problematic. It was used as the basis for the FBI roundups of the Issei in the days after Pearl Harbor. Its existence is a precedent that will continue to undercut the protection of people's rights. And this administration has further developed their racist plan for using detention as a method of ethnic cleansing and wants to further expand the already massive ICE detention system with the addition of congregate sites across the country. The similarity to the model of WRA camps should not be lost upon us in this moment. We have just learned that ICE is now beginning to use federal prisons as detention sites. Sources tell us that the Dublin Federal Prison, just 20 miles east of Oakland, will now be used to detain a large number of immigrants. Dubbed the Rape Club, this site was recently closed for rampant sexual abuse by the prison staff, including the warden. This is where they will begin imprisoning our neighbors after rounding them up from the surrounding communities, including the Bay Area. When the largest concentration camp in U.S. history, with a capacity for 30,000 plus beds, is now opened at Guantanamo Bay, and they are using Fort Bliss, a former JA internment site, to transfer prisoners there. And when ICE is now partnered with the Department of Defense in a site documented for its heinous use of torture, and when the administration has just announced they are once again preparing to open new sites to detain families and children in cages, we must find our courage and act. When they are sowing seeds, yes. And when they are sowing seeds of fear and chaos to keep us complacent, afraid, and exhausted, we must nonetheless act. We have been exhausted for a very long time. And of course, we are afraid of the violence they are promising to rain down on us. But like every iteration of crimes against humanity, we must oppose them. Because the human spirit is greater than fear and despair. Each of us must look within to our moral compass and be guided from that reference. How else are we to oppose the narrative they are creating about our history? Donald Trump equated the insurrectionists of January 6th to Japanese Americans as people whose civil liberties were violated. If we don't embody our own historical legacy, then this group that is attacking DEI, banning teaching of critical race theory, banning books, and now threatening to even erase our history from the National Archives, this is a real threat right now, then they will erase us and rewrite history as one of white supremacy. I know that if my mother were once again an 8-year-old girl in Minidoka, that I would fight to free her and stop this. Every 8-year-old child who will be in detention, separated from their families, is now my child. She is your child, and they are now our children. We are the people who know the harms of this kind of violence from our own family histories. And now our role is to lead the outrage and to awaken the righteous indignation of our nation. Our role is to organize and to stand in solidarity with any community being targeted as we were. This was never going to be a short fight. White supremacy has deep roots in our society. But we won't and we mustn't allow them to dictate the terms. We must heed Satsuki's words. We must be the allies that our people needed. This is the role our ancestors call us to play, to stop the repetition of their history. So Sudo for Solidarity and many community partners here in Northern California and nationwide are joining together to form a community defense network in solidarity with impacted neighbors and communities. And we are calling upon our elected officials to defend sanctuary cities and to defend immigrant communities and families. We will oppose the expansion of a gulag state. And here's how you can get involved. Join our community defense network. Get involved in large and small ways. Everyone is needed and everyone is welcome. And let's stand as a united front of Japanese Americans across the country. You can sign up in the lobby after this program for more information and updates, and we will have volunteers to assist you. Also, here locally, come to the Northern California Japanese American Community Defense Meeting on Sunday, March 23rd at Coho from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. We'll have flyers available if you sign up for the network, and we'll send updates to you. But you can also speak out and voice your opinion, your opposition. You can join local rapid response and resistance coalitions. You can demand and hold accountable your elected officials and ask them to oppose new detention contracts in your city or state. Demand also that your elected officials pledge non-collaboration with ICE or CBP. This means refusing to allow the police to work with ICE. ICE and CBP are about 200,000 strong across the country, and he's using them as his stormtroopers. If he is able to connect the dots and add law enforcement, they will have millions of law enforcement at their disposal. We must stop this. You can also please support the campaign and demand that Governor Newsom sign the pardon for Lam Hong Lei and other Southeast Asian immigrants. The Biden administration and the Trump administration have both targeted Southeast Asian immigrants for rapid deportations. This is unjust. These are our neighbors. Lam is here today. He is a family member. He is community, and he deserves not to serve a double punishment or to be treated unfairly and deported by this racist government. We need to support him, and we need to demand that Newsom answer to his constituents and sign the pardons for these people. He can end this nightmare right now. Finally, find a buddy or talk to your family and friends about what is happening. People are terrified and they're frozen right now, and they need chances to talk about how they feel and to try to understand how they can get involved and how they can make a difference. We need everyone to get involved right now. As a community who experienced deep fractures from state violence, we now have the opportunity to come together in solidarity to stop the repetition of history. This is part of our healing, and we are called by our ancestors to step forward. As long as we refuse to succumb to violence, much like our ancestors refused as they resisted inside the camps, then the forces of darkness will not prevail. I have deep faith that we will emerge from this dark time stronger and more unified. I hope you will join me in that belief and in that action. Okaga-sama de. Thank you.